I didn't know a single sentence could make a woman feel like she'd vanished. Not disappeared, not died, just erased. It was early afternoon when I pulled the cake out of the oven. The kitchen smelled like cocoa and sugar and something familiar comfort. Maybe the kind that settles into your bones when you've done the same thing for decades and your hands know the motions better than your mind does. I've baked that cake the same way every year since the late 80s. Same bowl, same chipped wooden spoon, same pause before sliding it into the oven. When I'd rest my palm on the door and whisper a quiet hope into the heat. Not a prayer, exactly, just a habit, a moment. I wrapped it carefully in foil, the way my mother taught me, tight but gentle. Then I placed it into my old wicker basket, the one with the broken handle I keep meaning to fix, but never do. That basket has carried birthday cakes, casseroles, pies. It knows where it's been. I was just tying the ribbon when my phone lit up on the counter. A message from my daughter-in-law. It read, "Don't bring anything. We don't eat your food." That was it. No hello. No explanation. No thank you for the effort I'd already made. Just that. I stood there holding the warm basket, the foil still radiating heat into my fingers, and something in my chest went hollow. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even anger. It was recognition. I wasn't being left out of dinner. I was being written out of the story. I set the basket down slowly, like it might shatter if I moved too fast. The cake was still cooling. Steam curled faintly at the edges. I stared at my phone again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder if I gave them time. They didn't. That's the thing about truth. When it finally shows up, it doesn't soften itself for you. Paul didn't send the message. Of course he didn't. He never does. He lets her speak for both of them. Has for years. And I let it happen because I told myself it was easier that way. Less friction, less drama. I told myself I was being gracious. But grace doesn't feel like this. Grace doesn't leave you standing alone in your own kitchen, wondering how long you've been shrinking without noticing. I sat down at the table and pulled the basket toward me. I rested my arms round it, almost protectively, like you would round something fragile or wounded. 30-some years of birthdays, dismissed with one sentence. I thought back to the first cake I ever baked for Paul. He was little then, barely tall enough to see over the counter, chocolate smeared on his cheek. He'd insisted on helping and ended up eating more batter than he mixed. "You make the best cakes in the world," he'd said, mouthful, eyes serious like he meant it with his whole heart. I believed him. Funny how belief works, how long it lasts. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I felt the burn behind my eyes, sure, but the tears didn't come. Instead, I stood up, cut myself a slice of cake, and sat back down. It was still warm, still soft, still mine. That mattered more than I expected it to. I ate it slowly, not because I was savoring it, but because I needed the time. Each bite felt like proof that something of me still existed, that my hands still made good things, that my presence hadn't evaporated just because someone else decided it was inconvenient. When I finished, I wrapped the rest and put it in the fridge. Then I opened the drawer where I keep the cards, all of them, every birthday card Paul has ever given me, tied together with a faded ribbon. I don't know why I kept them so neatly. Maybe I was afraid that if I didn't, I'd forget who I used to be to him. The early ones were messy, crayon drawings, misspelled words, love with no filter. The later ones were polite. The last few were just signed by him, no note from her. One year it was a printed poem with his name written underneath, like an afterthought. I held that one the longest. That's when it hit me not like a slap, but like a slow ache. A woman doesn't become invisible all at once. First, it's her opinions, then her voice, then her place at the table, and eventually, even her food becomes something people feel entitled to reject without explanation. I thought I was keeping the peace, but peace shouldn't feel like being erased. The house was too quiet. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second landing heavy in my chest. I considered calling my neighbor Nancy, but I didn't know how to explain this without sounding small. I baked a cake no one wants. That sentence didn't feel worth saying out loud, so I stayed where I was, and for the first time in a long time, I stopped pretending. Enough was enough. Not in a dramatic way, not with shouting, or tears, or slammed doors. Just a quiet decision settling into place. I took off my apron and folded it carefully. Then I reached for the small notebook I keep beside the stove. It's where I write things down so I don't forget them. Recipes, appointments, little truths I need to remember. I opened to a clean page, and I wrote, "They don't eat my food, but they still take my money." The words stared back at me, plain and undeniable, every month, like clockwork. School fees, emergency repairs, just until payday. I never asked questions. I never said no. I told myself that giving was the same thing as loving, but love shouldn't feel transactional. I closed the notebook and sat there for a long time. Tomorrow, I decided I'd go to the bank, not angry, just awake. And that was the beginning of everything changing. I slept that night, but it wasn't the kind of sleep that rests you. It was the kind where your body shuts down because it's tired of holding things up. I woke before the alarm, the house still dark, the refrigerator humming softly like it always did. For a moment, I lay there listening, letting the quiet settle around me. Not the heavy silence from the day before, but something sharper, more alert. Clarity has a sound. It's quiet, but it's not empty. I got dressed slowly. I earned a blouse I hadn't worn in over a year, the pale blue one. Too formal for grocery shopping. Too careful for a woman who didn't expect to be seen. But today, I wanted to be seen, even if it was only by myself. There's dignity in pressed cotton. The bank smelled like air conditioning and impatience. Fluorescent lights, low voices, the soft clatter of keyboards. A young man behind the counter smiled at me the way people smile at women my age, friendly, loud, just a little too careful. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" I slid my account number across the counter. Didn't smile back. "I'd like to review my automatic transfers." He blinked once, then nodded. "Of course, to your son's household." "Yes." He tapped at his screen, scrolling. "These have been active for quite a while. I know. Since Paul started his landscaping business, he'd asked for help just for a little while. A bridge loan, a cushion, the kind of help mothers give without asking for receipts. Months turned into years. The amount stayed quiet. The gratitude faded. They're listed as family support," the teller said. "Would you like to adjust the amount?" I took a breath, felt my spine straighten. "I'd like to stop them." He paused, just long enough to register surprise. "Stop them entirely. I'd like to stop paying people who don't want anything else from me." He didn't laugh, didn't ask questions, just nodded and clicked his mouse. "It'll take effect next month." "That's fine." I walked home slower than usual. Let the wind rattle the leaves. Let the decision settle. I expected guilt, anxiety, fear. What I felt instead was lightness. At home, I pulled out the bottom drawer of my dresser and took out the folder. The one labeled with Paul and Diana's names. Inside were statements, copies of checks, notes I'd written to myself so I wouldn't forget why money disappeared. I added a new page, canceled monthly support. No discussion, no guilt. Then I put the folder away. The phone buzzed around noon. Paul. "Hey, Mom. Did the bank say something was wrong?" "Got a notice about the transfer." "Not hi, Mom. Not how are you. Just business." I didn't answer. At 12:32, Diana called. I let it ring. Then I turned the phone off and left it in the kitchen drawer. Let them feel it. The quiet. I've worn it for years. Time they tried it on. Later that afternoon, I walked to the florist on the corner. Bright place. Overcrowded shelves. Smelled like lilies and damp stems. The owner looked up and smiled when she saw me. Double quotes, "Mrs. Ellis. Haven't seen you in a while. I'd like a bouquet delivered," I said to myself. She laughed, then softened when she realized I wasn't joking. "What kind?" "Bright, bold. Something that doesn't apologize for taking up space." She nodded. "Didn't ask why. That kind of kindness stays with you." When I got home, the house was still quiet, but it didn't feel empty. I reheated the leftover cake and ate another slice. Still rich, still soft, still mine. I started thinking about other things I'd let slide. The will, the deed, the way my name had slowly been erased from decisions that still depended on my money. I thought about Ben, my grandson, gentle, awkward, the only one who ever thanked me for pie with a hug. There were things I needed to do, but not today. Today, I sat with the silence, not the one they pushed me into, the one I chose. The next morning, I laid out every envelope they'd ever sent me. Not cards, requests, emergencies. Just this once, I started making a list. Year by year, dollar by dollar. Seed money for the business, emergency plumbing, school trips, groceries, surprises. Over a decade, it added up to more than I wanted to admit. And yet, this year, I was told not to bring cake. The numbers weren't what hurt. It was realizing how quietly love had turned into obligation. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. I need to make an appointment, I said. Things are changing. That night, the silence shifted again. I lit candles, baked scones just for myself, wrote a note in my notebook, and signed it like a friend would. You're not invisible. You were just misplaced. I slept better than I had in weeks. On Wednesday, there was a knock at the door. Paul. No warning. No text. Just him standing there, nervous, hands tucked into his jacket like he was 12 again. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside, but didn't rush to fill the space. He sat on the edge of the couch. I got a notice from the bank. I know. Everything okay? Yes. I just decided to stop giving to people who don't want anything else from me. He swallowed. Diana didn't mean anything by that message about my cake. She's just particular about food, I said, or about people. He didn't answer. I was coming anyway. I continued. Same recipe, same care. But it wasn't about the cake, Paul. It was about not being wanted. That's not true. But no one corrected her. Silence. I'm not cutting you off, I said finally. I'm changing the terms. He left without hugging me. And when the door closed, the quiet that followed wasn't heavy. It was space. And it was mine. The morning after Paul came by, I woke up with that strange feeling you get when you've finally said something out loud that you've been holding in for years. Not relief, just stillness, the kind that doesn't rush you. I made coffee and drank it standing at the counter, watching the steam rise and disappear. Funny how fast things vanish when you don't hold onto them. I used to think people were different, that if you loved them long enough, they'd stay. Turns out, love isn't glue. It's an invitation, and invitations can be ignored. I pulled the pale blue blouse from the chair, where I'd left it, and smoothed it again, even though it didn't need it. Habits don't disappear just because you wake up different. They linger, like ghosts. I had an appointment that morning with my lawyer. The office sat above a dentist and beside a coffee shop that played jazz too loud for the size of the room. The stairs creaked under my feet. No one offered to help me climb them. I didn't need it. At 79, you learn which help is kindness and which is just impatience dressed up nicely. My Dot Kent stood when I walked in. Firm handshake. Eye contact. The kind of man who still knew how to make a person feel present. What can I do for you, Mrs. Ellis? I want to change my will. He didn't blink, just nodded and pulled out a folder. Anything specific? Yes, I said. I want to remove Paul and Diana as beneficiaries. That got his attention, but he didn't react. Professionals rarely do. They wait. I want to leave everything to my grandson, Benjamin. All of it. All of it. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't awkward. It was respectful. The kind that lets you hear yourself think. They've forgotten I'm a person, I said quietly. Not a wallet. Not a backup plan. A person. He nodded once. Understood. Signing my name felt heavier than I expected. Not because of doubt. Because of finality. The notary stamped the papers with a dull thud, each one sounding like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. Back home, I made soup.lentils.simple, nourishing.one bowl, one spoon. I stopped setting to places a long time ago, but I didn't realize how much hope I packed into that habit until I let it go. That afternoon, I wrote a letter, not to Paul, to Ben. My handwriting shook at first, then steadied. Dear Ben, if you're reading this someday, I want you to know this isn't revenge. It's correction. You've always treated me like I mattered. I want what I leave behind to reflect that. I told him about the cake, about the message, about how small silence can make a person feel when it's been assigned to them. I folded the letter and tucked it inside my cookbook, the one he always asked me to use when we baked together. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Diana. Paul says you're upset. I hope this isn't about the cake. We've moved on from that kind of thing. That kind of thing. I stared at the words until they lost meaning. Some messages don't deserve replies. Some deserve distance. The next morning, I laid out every envelope they'd ever sent me asking for help. I made copies, not for court, not for confrontation, for truth, because someday Ben would ask why things changed, and I wanted him to have something solid, something that couldn't be rewritten. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. 3 soft taps. Ben, taller than I remembered, backpack over one shoulder. That same hesitant smile he's had since he was little, like he's always checking to see if he's welcome. Hi, Grandma. I stepped aside. You don't have to knock like that. I know, he said, but I like to. He sat at the kitchen table, looking around like the room might disappear if he didn't memorize it. I found your note, he said. You already got it. I stopped by the post office. The clerk knows me. I smiled. That's cheating. He shrugged. It's resourceful. We drank tea. He didn't ask questions. Didn't defend anyone. He just listened. You baked, he said, noticing the tin on the counter. No reason, I said. Just habit. He opened it and smiled. You remembered. I never forget the people who see me. He hugged me before he left. Tight. Real. No hurry. After he was gone, I stood in the kitchen and realized something important. Nothing had changed, and everything had, because I had stopped waiting to be chosen. I was choosing. Silence changes shape when you stop fearing it. Before, it used to feel like punishment, like something I'd earned by saying the wrong thing or needing too much. But once I stopped chasing it away, once I let it sit beside me, without flinching, it turned into something else entirely. Space. The next few days passed without calls. No texts. No just checking in. I didn't check my phone the way I used to, face down on the table, screen lighting up every few minutes with nothing. Instead, I started noticing things again. The way the sun hits the kitchen floor in the late afternoon. The sound the screen door makes when it doesn't quite close right. The smell of coffee lingering longer than it should. I'd forgotten how much of myself I'd packed away while waiting. One afternoon, I pulled out every birthday card Paul had sent me since he married Diana. I laid them across the table in a neat line. 12 years, 12 cards. Most were generic. Printed poems, signatures that looked rushed. Only the first one had a handwritten note. Thanks for always being there. We're lucky to have you. That was before she stopped calling me by my name. I tied the cards together with twine, not to keep, to return. I wasn't angry. I was done pretending those words still fit. Later that day, I called my lawyer again, asked him to prepare a simple letter. No accusations, no bitterness, just facts. They'd receive it by the end of the week. Not as punishment, as clarity. That evening, I sat by the fire with my quilt across my knees and sewed another square. This one from an old dish towel sunflowers faded, but still bright at the corners. Bright things endure longer than we expect. The phone rang. Paul. I let it go to voicemail, but I listened. Mom, we got your letter. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this feels extreme. Cutting us out over one message. Diana's hurt. She feels attacked. He paused. I just thought you were better than this. That sentence landed heavier than all the rest. Better than this. As if enduring disrespect quietly was virtue. As if shrinking yourself was love. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my notebook and wrote, "They'll tell the story their way. Let them. My truth lives in what I did, not what I explain." The next morning, I baked again, not the chocolate cake. Something simpler. Oatmeal. Cinnamon. no one's favorite but mine. While it cooled, I found an old box in the attic. Letters Paul wrote me when he was in college. Real letters, tender ones. He used to miss me. I read them sitting on the floor, dust in my nose, hands shaking just a little. I didn't cry. I folded them neatly and placed them beside my notebook. A reminder, people don't lose kindness overnight. They misplace it. On Thursday, I called the community center. Yes, the woman said brightly. We still need volunteers for the baking class. I wore my old apron, the one Ben drew on with a marker years ago, and taught strangers how to listen to a cake instead of stabbing it. They laughed. They listened. They thanked me. When I walked home, the street lights were coming on, one by one. The world hadn't changed, but I had. That night, Diana left another voicemail. She said it wasn't fair, that Ben was being caught in the middle, that we needed to talk like adults. I deleted it. Fairness isn't asking someone to stay quiet so others can stay comfortable. Saturday afternoon, there was a knock. Ben again. No hesitation this time. He brought honey from the market. For my tea. They think you're retaliating, he said gently. And what do you think? He looked at me. Really looked. I think you're reclaiming something. I smiled. We sat without rushing, without defending, without fixing. Before he left, he hugged me longer than usual. After the door closed, I wrote another line in my notebook. He came back because he wanted to, not because he needed something. That mattered. That stayed. And somewhere in that quiet house, with the quilt warm across my knees and the smell of cinnamon still in the air, I realized something steady and true. Silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it means you finally stopped begging to be heard. Sunday evening, the knock was different. No hesitation, no rushed rhythm, just one firm knock, followed by silence. I saw him through the front window before I opened the door. Paul alone. No flowers, no bag of groceries, no excuses in his hands, just his shoulders slightly slumped, like a man who hadn't rehearsed what he was about to say. I opened the door and waited. Can I come in? He asked. That depends, I said calmly. Is this a visit or a performance? He flinched, just a little, but he didn't argue. A visit, he said, I think. I stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands on his knees like he used to when he was a boy waiting to be corrected. I didn't offer tea. I didn't sit down. I stood near the window, arms loosely crossed, watching the last of the daylight stretch thin across the floor. I saw Ben's post, he said finally. Which one? The cake. I nodded. He baked it. You baked again, he said, softer now. I never stopped. He looked up then, really looked. Not through me, not past me. At me. Why didn't you tell me how much you were hurt? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I did, I said eventually. Every time I stayed quiet. Every time I showed up anyway. Every time I let things slide so you wouldn't have to choose. He exhaled slowly. You changed the will. I had to. But everything, his voice cracked. Why everything? Because I want what I leave behind to reflect what I gave and who gave back. He rubbed his temples like his head hurt. You raised me to be better than this. I shook my head. I raised you with love. Being better was always your choice. That landed. He looked smaller then, not weak, just stripped of the stories he'd told himself. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. He said quietly, "You didn't want to know." He didn't deny it. "I told Diana not to send that message," he muttered. "She said it was easier than having the conversation." "Easier for who?" I asked. He didn't answer. "I didn't come to fight," he said after a moment. "I just wanted to know if it's too late." Too late. People ask that when they finally notice the door isn't wide open anymore. "It's not too late to speak," I said. "But it might be too late to speak for both of you." He nodded slowly. "I miss the kitchen. I know. I miss when it was easy." "It was never easy," I said gently. "It was just quiet." That hit him harder than anger ever could. "I've been quiet too long," he admitted. "And you've been polite too long." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly it." He stood to leave, then stopped at the door. "I'm sorry. I didn't rush to accept it. I let it sit between us, heavy and real." "Let your actions be the apology," I said. He nodded. "Will you come to dinner next week? Just us." "I'll think about it." That was the truth. And the truth is all I offer now. After he left, the house didn't collapse into silence. It settled. Not forgiveness, not closure, just clarity. And for the first time, that felt like enough. I didn't answer Paul's invitation right away. Not because I was trying to make a point. Not because I wanted him to feel uncertain. But because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel rushed to decide. The days that followed moved differently, slower, fuller. Like time had finally stopped pushing me forward and started walking beside me instead. I quilted in the afternoons, stitching pieces of my past into something that could keep me warm in the future. A strip from George's old flannel shirt. A corner of the apron Ben had stained with chocolate years ago. Uneven pieces, but honest ones. I taught my baking class on Thursdays. Watched grown adults cry over their first successful cake, not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. There's something sacred about making something with your own hands when no one is rushing you. Ben started coming by regularly. No announcements, no apologies, just presence. One afternoon, he helped me fix the screen door that had been sticking for years. Didn't complain, didn't rush, just worked quietly beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "They're upset," he said once, carefully. "I know. They think you're dividing the family. I smiled. I'm not building walls. I'm choosing where my door is. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. He understood more than he realized. Nancy came by one evening with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. No explanation. She never needed one. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. I'm rearranging. She laughed. About time. We talked about nothing important and everything. That night, I wrote another list in my notebook. Not of debts or disappointments, things that were still mine. My recipes, my home, my name, my silence, my Sundays, my choices. I underlined the last one twice. Paul texted once. Just an update. No requests, no guilt. I replied with a single word. Nice. That felt right. Diana never called. I stopped wondering if she would. Some people mistake boundaries for cruelty because they've only known access without effort. On Friday, I bought apricots made jam, labeled the jars with the year, kept one, gave one to Nancy, set one aside for Ben. I didn't tell Paul. Not everything needs an audience. Saturday came and went quietly. No dinner invitation reminder. No pressure. Just space. And in that space, something unexpected happened. Peace didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The house was still that morning. Not silent, still. There's a difference. You only learn after you've lived long enough. Silence feels like waiting. Stillness feels like arriving. I sat on the porch wrapped in my quilt, watching the neighborhood wake up. Kids ran past with backpacks too big for their shoulders. A dog barked at nothing. Somewhere down the block, someone burned toast. Life, unapologetically ordinary. I made oatmeal and ate it slowly, the way I do now. No clock to beat, no one to accommodate. Just a spoon, a bowl, and the soft creak of the porch beneath my feet. Later, I opened the cedar chest in the spare room, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were remnants of who we used to be George's cufflinks, my wedding veil, Paul's baby blanket, Ben's kindergarten certificate. I held each piece like a question. What stays? What goes? I brought the quilt downstairs and spread it across the table. It wasn't perfect. Uneven stitching, colors that didn't quite match, but it told the truth. And truth, I've learned, is warmer than perfection. Around noon, there was a knock. Ben. No hesitation this time, just confidence. He brought coffee, forgot the sugar, drank it anyway, and laughed at himself. We sat at the table. My tableland didn't rush the conversation. They asked if I thought you'd forgive them. He said carefully. And what did you say? I said forgiveness isn't the same thing as access. I smiled. He was learning faster than I had. Before he left, he hugged me tight, steady, real. After he was gone, I stood in the kitchen and looked around. Nothing had changed, and everything had. Paul texted that evening, just a simple line. I understand more than I used to. I didn't reply right away. Some understanding needs time to prove itself. As the sun went down, I baked one last cake that day. Not chocolate, something lighter, orange and almond. I ate the first slice standing at the counter, watching the sky change color. This is what healing tastes like, I thought. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need witnesses. It just needs honesty. Later, I wrote one final note in my notebook. I am not a background figure. I am not a placeholder. I am not something to be tolerated. I am Margaret Ellis. I bake. I remember. And I do not disappear. That night, I slept with the window open. Let the cold air remind me I was still here. The next morning, a little girl ran past the porch and waved. "Hi, baking lady." I waved back. I'll make cookies next week, I thought, just in case she circles back. Some kindness leaves echoes, and dignity, when reclaimed, feeds more people than silence ever did. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or quietly set aside, this isn't a story about revenge. It's about remembering you were always allowed to take up space. Reclaim your table. Bake again. This time, for yourself.